And away we go. Welcome to the pickup meeting. First one to check their phone loses. Wait, it should be like first one to check their phone buys drinks later.
Yeah.
But since we're doing this on Zoom, it just means we're buying our own drinks.
That is true. Absolutely. I could send you a Venmo, I guess.
That's true. We'll have to think about that one. Hey,
a
welcome
virtual
back.
Drink.
A virtual drink. A beverage. A beverage for us all virtually.
Yes.
That's
How you
right.
doing?
I am so good. You know, it's the end of March time frame. We've gotten through March Madness. Baseball's kicking up. Spring is in full effect. Allergies are kicking our butts. And it's beautiful because we're moving past winter. How are you?
I'm doing great. I assume your bracket's already busted if it wasn't to begin with. Did you know, Kevin, I don't really do brackets anymore.
Why is that?
Well, I became the faculty athletics rep in 2009 at USI, and the gambling piece with the NCAA is a pretty big deal. So I just stopped doing it. And now that I'm not a faculty rep, I've just decided that I'm not going to let people know how bad I am at picking college basketball games. So I just don't do it anymore. And then I just say, that's exactly what I would have picked.
Exactly it. Do you find that you do better in your mental bracket picking when Indiana is or is not in the tournament?
I think if they're in the tournament, I'm a total wreck. I have no idea how to pick them. You know, when they were number one in the country in 2013 and 14 and they lost to Syracuse in the Sweet 16, I mean, I had them going the whole way. I really thought it was their year. And I wanted to believe that they could break that Syracuse myth, that matchup zone, and they just played terrible that day. So ever since then, I don't really know what to do with them. And they haven't been in the NCAA tournament all that much since 2013-14 either. So I sometimes will theme the picks, and I never pick the right theme. You know, a couple years ago, I did one with my brothers, I guess. I should say I've never done them. But my theme was the Big Ten all gets to the Final Four, and that was the year I think Purdue lost in the first round. And you're like,
well for you.
It's over before it even started.
Braden, you know, he doesn't really care, right? Like I would say he stays aware of what's going on in the sports world, but in general, he just is not a big fan of it. But he always did the bracket of mascots, like a mascot bracket.
Love it.
And so from the point in which he could speak, it was like, do you like the Terrapins or do you like the Wildcats?
Yes.
And so then it's like, what's a terrapin? You know, it's kind of an angry turtle. I don't know. Like, I don't know what it is. I mean, it kind of dates it because I don't think Maryland goes to tournaments anymore either. But
right.
that technique did allow him to pick UMBC. So it worked out for him.
It did work out for him. That's for sure.
Now, is this period of time the greatest couple weeks in sports? Like, is March Madness still that winner take all like moment of the year?
I don't know. The NIL piece makes it a little tougher, but the upsets, I do think that college basketball there's more parity than we really want to believe, even if the best teams kind of end up in the Final Four in most instances. Although we've seen historically lots of years where the underdog gets to the Final Four. And I know that when I was in Indiana, those couple of years that Butler made it to the final game back-to-back was pretty crazy. You know, you've got Loyola making it to the Final Four. So it's not as if those things don't happen. But I do enjoy watching the games for sure. I used to take the Thursday and Friday afternoons off as vacation back in the old days when I really, really cared. And I would just go to a sports bar and by myself or with a friend of mine, and we would just watch the games all the way through. Just loved that.
Yeah, I did the same. I would usually take off Thursday or Friday. I can remember taking off, and by taking off, I mean playing hooky and all of a sudden having a fever as a teenager.
Yes.
And the ACC tournament the week before the NCAA tournament, it was like, oh, I'm going to take off and just watch that.
Right.
And watch basketball in that way. And I still think that it is one of the best time frames. But as this episode's being released, we're about a month from when the Olympics ended, and we talked about this briefly on another episode of the pickup meeting. But like our feelings on the Winter Olympics. And I will say, I don't feel like I watched a lot of Winter Olympics, but I think everyone else did. And so I think that time frame of the Olympics and that, 14,
Yes.
16 days of it is must-see TV for folks and probably a March Madness equivalent. Now, I will admit, I did get up at whatever time, 7 o'clock in the morning yesterday or Sunday to watch the gold medal hockey game. And I don't know that there was much better viewing experience of anything I've watched sports related in quite some time than
So
that.
fun. I really enjoyed the game too. I'm surprised we weren't texting each other, but we normally do that. But we did. I did watch the game, and I enjoyed it immensely.
Yeah, there's something about the emotion of that, and I'm a little less on the like USA versus Canada versus like you could really just feel like that there was actually like you could touch the energy that was occurring in that environment, and you could just like feel the excitement that was happening. It was a wow moment. And sometimes I think the NCAA tournament, and specifically, which is really hard about it, the first 2 days of the tournament are in that vein, as opposed to the Final Four. Most of the time, I don't care.
Yes, because my team's not there, but
yeah.
I mean, I was super surprised that the United States had not won a gold medal since 1980. I did not realize that. I know we're a month on, but that really surprised me. And, we talk about this being the wheelhouse of sports for fans. I mean, opening day is coming right up, and we can talk about that maybe in our next one. But, boy, it's a fun time to be a sports fan, that's for sure.
It is. And if you are not a sports person, you've hated these first 8 minutes of this episode.
Yes, but we can rebound because we have something really important to talk about today. And we've only really covered this topic tangentially. Say that a couple times.
Keep going. I'll keep watching.
But we haven't talked a lot about faculty impact on student success and academic advising. And I think it's time we kind of unpack this.
Yeah, because I think that in some of this conversation comes from the Administrators Institute. And I'll say for me, we had a few faculty that were in attendance at the event. And it was refreshing to see department chairs or folks that grew up in the faculty rank and are now administrators in some way, coming and learning and growing within the experience that they were getting there. But I'm looking at this and I say, and I think that faculty themselves said this, is that there's this perception that faculty advising is bad advising.
I know it. I don't like that at all.
And I don't like that either, because what I really think the truth of the situation is bad advising, whether by a faculty member or a primary role advisor. If it's done right, it can be great. It doesn't matter who it is. Bad advising is just bad advising. It doesn't have to be by a faculty member or a staff member. It's just bad advising being done. And that can happen from all kinds, but there's this notion that faculty don't advise as well. And I feel like that's just wrong.
Yeah, I'm not sure we've been great. And by we, I mean as an advising community, at thinking about the role faculty play, not just in advising, but you wrote this down in the notes, and I 100% agree with this. But I do think faculty are often the most underutilized partner in our student success and retention efforts. Why do you think that is?
Honestly, I think because there's a few aspects that are going on. For a faculty member, typically advising on their campuses is not valued. And that's a concern, because when there's all of the things from a service component or committee involvement or teaching or research that faculty have to care about for tenure, promotion, various things within their organizations that they're a part of, like that they have to, that's their focus. I think all of a sudden we think from outside looking in that advising is maybe not as valued by them as it should be. The other thing that I think occurs is that when we're talking about retention and student success, we're often thinking about we have limitations on time, most bang for our buck as far as effort. And so we want to put something together that's going to serve hundreds of students and not typically a student. And faculty serve hundreds of students, but typically when we're talking about the at-risk nature of things, we're not talking about hundreds of students by a particular faculty member. And so we're looking for the widest net to do the greatest good. And faculty have an opportunity to really impact on an individual basis that we sometimes in higher ed like to ignore.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned impact. Marcia, we wrote down in the notes, and we don't have to talk about this, but like faculty members that kind of had a big impact on us. And Marcia Baxter Magolda was a faculty member at Miami University. Peter Magolda, Judy Rogers were my three primary faculty members when I was at Miami. What a trio of superstars in higher education, for sure. But Marcia talked a lot about student development and the impact of faculty. And what she said was, if we just realize that faculty's greatest impact is in the classroom, like just be a better faculty member, be a better teacher of your content. And I think a lot of the research kind of builds on that. Tinto talks about faculty members being at the center of any institution's retention efforts. And to me, it just feels simple, right? We don't help faculty understand the kind of impact they can have in the classroom by being great instructors. And if we worked with them, and I think as advisors, or even as a higher ed professional, I would just tell faculty, just be really good at what you cover in class. Get good at making your classroom an engaging place, a place where you believe in the efforts of the students in your class. And I think student success and retention would increase and be better if we collectively kind of thought about the role of faculty in that way. Just, Marcia Baxter Magolda said, just be better in your discipline, be better in your teaching of your discipline in the classroom, and it's going to have a massive impact on student success and retention.
I attended this success summit many, many years ago, and George Koo was there, and he talked about the things that are really impactful from a faculty perspective in retention work. And he said, have your best faculty teaching your freshmen and sophomores.
Yes.
But here's the thing he doesn't say, how do you determine who your best faculty are? Because typically in the campus experiences and when I've done presentations and you've looked at the data, sometimes your best faculty aren't faculty at all. And they're your adjunct or call staff or temporary folks that you bring in that bring a different energy and passion to things. And that was one of these really hard conversations at a former institution of these folks are impacting retention in really massive ways. Yeah. And so like what's happening in and out of the classroom, you're absolutely correct. Like we need more faculty to teach at that 100 and 200 level to ensure that students are getting connected with their departments. And I think that institutions that have this figured out really have that combination of great advising occurring, but also great experiences happening in those early classroom experiences.
Yeah, there was an article in the Chronicle a couple of years ago, I remember, talked a little bit about the importance of positive interactions with faculty members, right? These authentic human connections really help students graduate at a greater level, right? When we can have those positive interactions, and this is really about helping students kind of be more confident in their ability to get through challenges, to their ability to believe that they can accomplish these things. And when faculty are committed and engaged and promote that kind of belief with their students, it makes a huge difference, a huge difference.
I think about this from the faculty advising standpoint, this kind of jump there for a minute. There were several years I ran a program at Western Kentucky University and kind of borrowed the theming and the approach that Missouri State had done
Yeah.
At their institution for an overall development. But my effort was just for faculty, called the Master Advisor Certificate. And so
Yes.
faculty only would be supported by their colleges and their departments, and 25 would go through this program. And the very first session that we did with faculty was, what do you know? And like, what do you know about advising, and how did you learn it? And I would say, of those graduates over the time frame I did it, which was about 100 folks that went through the program in those 4 years that I was responsible for it, I would say 9 times out of 10, the guidance and how those faculty advisors were advising, was they were just leaning on the experience that they had as a student.
Yeah.
With faculty advising. And so when we look at that and we say, is it good? Is it bad? Is it great? Is it, like, what is it? It's typically just not developed approaches. And so when we talk about development and growth of an advising practice for the faculty advising experience, I don't know that we usually put a lot of work into getting faculty to be there to also be a part of that growth and development. We just assume, well, they know the curriculum sometimes.
Yes,
they're going to know how to advise.
Yeah.
That's not how advising works.
No. Yeah, we lean into this. We've leaned into the strengths when we've had a chance to have that kind of work done. I know when I first got to the University of Southern Indiana, other than with undecided students and conditionally admitted students, we were in a faculty-based model, and we were trying to make that experience a better one. And Shelley Blunt and I, we put in for some funding with the Provost's office and got funded to do this Training the Trainers program. And we brought faculty advising champions, right? Folks that were kind of superstars in their undergraduate colleges. And we trained them to go out and work with other faculty to kind of help them understand the role that faculty advising plays in student success. And we started with the core competencies, right? The conceptual, informational, relational. And we really started with the conceptual first. And I'll never forget getting the evaluations. A couple of our faculty members were like, well, you didn't share the information right away. Students need to know specific things. And I was like, well, yeah, that's true. We do need to be credible in the work, but students aren't going to care unless they know what role you play in their development as students. And we had a great time with that program. It was a 2-day program, and we brought people back, and these faculty did spring semester sessions with their faculty advising caseloads within their undergraduate colleges. It led to a lot of great outcomes. And I think the other piece is just I think we should assume that faculty want to do a good job in this work, right? If we come from a bad assumption, then I think that's also going to impact the way that we as maybe professional advisors see faculty, and nobody wins when that happens.
Yeah, that's right. And I think one of the things too, when we talk about faculty impacts on retention, the topic that comes up a lot is the early alert interventions that are happening on campus.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that those are invaluable efforts, but I'm curious your thought here, because the last few years have had great success. And I would say everywhere I've been would have similar numbers to this as far as faculty feedback. And generally we're talking about freshman and sophomore responses, certain number of classes, maybe new students, something like that. This year, second semester, new system. We are Slate campus. And so we're using that Slate student success platform, 88% response rate.
That's amazing.
Right. And I would say that has been my norm on 3 different campuses now.
Yeah.
Now, on the flip side of that, do I think that all early alert efforts, regardless of response rates, are effective with faculty? I don't know that I think that's true, right? We're getting things back, but is it really the faculty having a drastic impact on student success? No, I think their drastic impact is probably far beyond what they provide an early alert. And so it's like, how do you balance the time that they put into that does have some value, and time that they put in other ways that are impactful? I think that to me is just a hard balance, because faculty absolutely matter in the retention student success world.
Yeah, what we've tried to do anywhere that I've been is close the loop on what faculty really think the big issues are. So at the University of Southern Indiana, when we moved our rates up, I think there was this concern that we were going to see a significant increase in withdrawals from these courses. Right? You're just trying to get students to withdraw earlier. And so one of the things we had to do was gather data that says, no, that's not what we're trying to do. And that's not what the data suggested. And actually, quite conversely, is what ended up happening was students were withdrawing less because we were able to reach out to them early as in our professional advising world, our professional advisors that were working with first and second year students, we could reach out. They got to the interventions quicker, and it really made a huge difference. Even here at Illinois State, our response rates have been really pretty strong, even though we do this later in the semesters. And I think all faculty really want to know is that you're doing something with that information, right? That you're reaching out to the student, you're helping them understand where they sit in this space at this moment in time, and making sure that they either, one, are reaching back out to faculty to kind of get a potential intervention there that could be helpful, or seeking out tutoring, or if withdrawal is what has to happen, that the student understands the implication of that withdrawal so that they can make an informed decision about what to do next if they are struggling. And so I think that closing the loop piece really matters in your relationships with faculty across that spectrum, right? And if they're playing a role in retention and student success efforts, how do we close the loop on those efforts and make sure they understand the role that they've played in that space?
Yeah, I agree completely. That you've got to fulfill the whole project, and that closing the loop is big. I'm curious if you feel like you have a faculty member that changed your trajectory, and maybe that was, the story you mentioned earlier, but maybe it was somebody else along the road there that you've had in your journey. Was there one that impacted you? There are names that speak out to me, and I've mentioned some of them before in previous episodes. Doc McGahee and how he taught. Yeah. Steve Cox, that was in the OrgComm department at Murray State. Strangely, and I don't think I had the greatest appreciation for Dr. Coleman at Murray State when I was there. She, led that senior class, and it was like, we have to do what? We have to present on what topic? Yeah. And like we have to talk for how long? But like really effective faculty member that I think really helped me grow in my communication effort. But I don't know that changed my trajectory in higher education. I think back to some of those. I think of Dr. Barbara Birch, who was the provost at Western Kentucky, and she taught a course that was just higher ed topics. And she would come into a room with just 10 of us, give us a topic, and let us go. And the ability to think differently, I think, was a really powerful learning experience. And so I have a lot of respect for that as far as how I think nowadays from that classroom experience that at the time felt like she didn't really have anything to add. And so she just came in and gave us the topic from her day. And I don't think that's really what happened. I think there was purpose in it. And she did really well in helping me see a different way of thinking.
Yeah. At the undergraduate level, I have two in particular. George Juergens was this history faculty member, taught 29 years at Indiana University, and just was amazing. He taught a course called The Presidents in the Press. I think I've talked about this course. Maybe 10% of the grade was that 1,000-page book on the powers that be by David Halberstam. But boy, he brought history to life and always kind of taught in this way that made you kind of think about history in conflicting views. And so, there never was one way to kind of think about history, which I always loved. And then Marjorie Hershey was just a superstar in the Department of Political Science. I took my Intro to American Politics class with her. And then I took a couple other courses with her at the 300 level, political parties and interest groups. And, once I found somebody that I really loved, I took Intro to History with George Juergens, that American history. I took Presidents in the Press. I took social history from the Civil War to like the Depression. And then with Marjorie, it was political parties and interest group, Intro to American Politics. Those classes just ring so familiar to me, right? Just the topics and the passion with which they spoke about those issues really made my undergraduate experience so meaningful. And there were lots of great faculty. Rich Pacelli, who taught in political science, he would often have lunch with us and talk to us about the world. He taught our con law class, and I just loved that class. And then at the master's level, I mean, Marcia Peter Magolda, Judy Rogers, so impactful in the way that I think about student success, student development, and the best faculty members cared about your life outside of school too. Peter was such a great music fan, and we would talk about music all the time after class. And if we would go to his house, they'd sometimes have the cohort to the house. And it really is, the power of faculty really is unbelievable. I've seen it in my daughter's lives too. They both had wonderful faculty members at the University of Southern Indiana that really enhanced their development, not just as students, but as persons. And so, we got to remember that in the advising community. I think we are sometimes pretty hard on faculty, and really at great peril in my mind.
And we have to remember, you said something there at the end that I think is so helpful, because I think advisors try sometimes, in whether it's faculty or a primary role professional staff advisors, to put the environment into a box, right? And you talked about going to lunch with or having meals with. Same thing on my end, right? Like I remember after class, like the class getting together, and we had a guest speaker, and it was at that time Murray State President King Alexander, or how he went by, F. King Alexander, say that fast, King Alexander. And he went to the chicken strip place down in the student center and just sat and talked to us about higher ed and the things he faces as a president and all those things. I mean, it made a monumental difference and left a lasting impression. And for him, it was just having dinner with students. And for us, it was, we're going to remember that conversation for a long time, 25, 30 years later, in that range. And so it's pretty important to do those things that are maybe a little non-traditional too.
I think we did pretty good today on this topic.
God, we were excellent. You're welcome, America. And Canada.
Yes. And the global community.
Well, yes, I was thinking about, we know we have listeners that are primarily in the United States and Canada, but yes, welcome, world. All right, so fun transition again to things that are outside of higher ed. And I think that we're typically learning a little bit about each other. And so I'm curious, what are your top 3 jobs you've had outside of higher ed?
Oh, man. I'll start young. I'll go young to old. Does that sound okay?
Yes.
Like my first job, the only job I really had from the time I was 12 or 13 until I went to college.
Oh, I know this one.
I was a newspaper boy.
You made bank because you bought your car with it.
I did.
Man, that was an expensive paper route.
Right. I mean, so I had a paper route, and I loved that job. We started with the afternoon route, and then the people that delivered. Think about this. This is the 80s, Kevin. There were 2 newspapers printed in Evansville, Indiana in 1983, a morning edition and an evening edition.
And now there's just Twitter.
And those newspapers. I mean, it's 100% true.
Yeah.
And so, look, 365 days a year, you wake up every morning at 5:00 and you deliver those newspapers. And
this is why you're a morning person.
Yeah, and it is. And in the 80s, you had to collect the money from the customers. There was no Venmo, right? I had to go door to door and get my money. Like, I want my $2, right? $2. I want my $2.
All right. What's the second job?
Second job. So in between my sophomore year and junior year of college, I did an internship with Citizens Bank, and I worked in the mailroom. And it was this internship program, and all these other folks, these other college students from all these other places ended up in great little areas in the bank, like finance and trust and all these things. And I got to work in the mailroom. And initially I was really upset about that. And then it was like the greatest thing in the world, because all I did was deliver mail to all of these important areas where the other interns were just sitting like filing papers and doing. I mean, we were listening to rock and roll music in the mailroom, and then I got to deliver the mail, and I got to meet all of the professionals that were working in each of these areas. It was fantastic. Now, I almost got killed because we used to do bank delivery, and I was outside one day in a rainstorm, and some lady ran a red light and almost killed me. I pulled my greatest stuntman, jumped onto the hood of the car, and rolled onto the windshield and kind of screamed at the lady.
Listen, this story sounds cooler than it probably is. Like,
it was awesome.
Like the Brody version of what occurred. And then what really happened was like a slight jump and then like awkward rolling. And then like you just see some young kid yelling at an old woman in the car.
It might have been like that. No, it wasn't like that. I'm telling the story the way I want to tell the story. But it was great. Like, so you start to think about the role that the mailroom plays. But for me, I just got to meet all of the really great folks, right? So rather than sitting at a desk and being it was really amazing. And the other interns, when we would go to the meetings, they were just, they hated life because they were not doing anything as fun as what I was doing. And then the last job, I mean, for 5 years, from 30 until 35, my last 5 years at the University of Northern Iowa, I had my own sports radio talk show. God, it was so great. 5:10 to 6 o'clock. Brother Brody, bringing sports salvation to the airwaves. That was my tagline. Oh, it was so awesome.
That's a good job. That's a good time.
I had Tony Dorsett. I talked to Don Dinkinger. I talked to the MVP of the WNBA. You played for the Minnesota Lynx. I mean, so many stars. Kirk Ferentz, Steve Alford, like that's all amazing. Of the Greg McDermott, all the coaches in Iowa. It was awesome. So much fun.
That is fantastic.
How about you? What were your three?
So the three that came to mind is, first, one of my favorite jobs ever is working at Hardee's. Gosh, I love working at Hardee's.
You did?
Yeah, like I was so good I got the job so that I could work with some high school classmates. I think like Ryan Gerlach and Carl Adams, throwback for Sparta, Illinois listening. And I was working there for like a week doing the night shift. And the manager was like, "You're kind of pretty good at this and you're not a jerk. And so like, can you start working in the mornings?" And so then I'm there at like 4:30 or 5 making biscuits and getting the front line ready and people showing up. And I'm like, well, I'm learning their orders. This guy wants biscuits and gravy every day. And this guy wants this. I loved it. It's like instant gratification position, right? Like they order something, I give it to them. I don't screw up. They're happy. I'm happy. All of the things are great. And I still go to Hardee's now and have breakfast. It is a great place.
Yeah. And to be honest, the ham, egg, and cheese biscuit may be the greatest fast food item of all times. That Hardee's ham, egg, and cheese biscuit. Golly, so good.
There you go. Thank you, Hardee's. The second place I can remember, and I think this was pre-Hardee's, is I worked for the Sparta Airport, which that sounds like an exciting job. But it wasn't. And so there was a group of like 4, 5, 6 of us that would be in the back of a room, and we would sort aerial slides of irrigation patterns that a photographer and a pilot would go up and shoot in states surrounding Illinois. So it was like Illinois, Ohio, Missouri, Arkansas, Kentucky, and they would fly down to that, and they would travel straight lines. And then they would shoot that, and then they would send us the film, and then we would compile it and send it to different farm bureaus and different places throughout the country so that farmers could use that to plant their crops.
That sounds terrible.
It was a lot. We listened to a lot of music and just looked at slide sorters, like bright things just shooting at your eyes. Like it was a lot. Now, the cool thing is I can remember going to lunch and getting in the plane in Sparta and flying to Sykeston, Cape Girardeau area to go have lunch at Lambert's for some throwed rolls.
Well,
and so that's the only time I've ever flown a plane. I got in a plane and the guy said, "Okay, this is a test plane. I can take control, but we're going to let you take off and land." And it's like, all right, this is something. And I'm glad to not ever be a pilot. So like that was a lot, but it was a good experience. And then the last one that I would say, and this is kind of in higher education, so I guess I could tweak this a little bit.
You can cheat.
As a student, I worked for the Murray State News. I was I think I was the assistant sports editor. Maybe at some point I was the sports editor. I don't really remember, but I used to write opinion pieces and cover stories. There was one of my favorite was I covered intramural sports for the Murray State News. And there was a basketball team, a men's basketball team that was named Butta. And so I did the headline that said Butta rolls on because they won. And they're like, no, we're not putting that in there. And I'm like, you've got to put that in there. The rest of the article is junk, but the headline is amazing. And so I remember writing these articles and just having way more fun with it than I should have.
That's incredible.
It's fun. Hey, we got to wrap this up. But before we get to your part, I do want to say it's the end of March. And all of us that are probably listening to this podcast, except for my father who tunes in and then will send us things to talk about next time.
I need to see that list.
Yeah. All of us work in higher ed. And I will say that this is a pretty key time frame of the semester where your relationships with students matter most. And so whether you're faculty, your staff, you're trying your best in the student success world, don't let the busyness of this season, because this is when we blink and all of a sudden it's moved from February to May pretty quickly. Don't let the busyness of this season keep you from connecting with your students and helping them succeed at their highest level.
Yeah, and we're also a little tired, right? Maybe a little fatigued. We can see the end, but you got this. You can get it done. Finish strong, right?
You got this.
Yeah. So, all right, folks, that's it for this edition of the Pickup Meeting. We hope your own meetings, formal or pickup style, are as meaningful as fun as this one. And until next time, do good. Be nice.